Testing 1, 2. Check one. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. Good evening. It is just past 6 o'clock, and we're going to get started with our first InSight Community Connection Series session. We are here today at Heron Creek Middle School down in the Northport area. We know that so often we have most of our meetings up there in Central and in Mid-County, so it's great to be down here in South County. To hear from our constituents and from our staff members. And it's an opportunity to really just get dialogue, because when we're in a regular board meeting, because of Robert's Rules of Order and the way that we construct those meetings, it's difficult to have that. You know, you have your public comment section, but really the board doesn't have an opportunity to respond. And so the goal here is just to enter into some dialogue. It's not to be argumentative. It's not an opportunity to berate or be derogatory, but really to engage in dialogue that is centered around the education of our students of Sarasota County. And so we're excited to do this. So I am Superintendent Terry Connor, and glad to be here. We'll do some introductions real quick, and then we'll hand it over to our moderator, Ms. Chris Parento. But essentially, with the number of people that are in the room, I think this can be very more informal and less structured. We do have a protocol and a structure for these meetings in the event that we have a lot of members attending. But with the number here, I think we can be a little more informal and conversational.
Hello, I'm Robin Marinelli.
I am Bridget Ziegler.
And I'm Tom Edwards.
Liz Barker.
And we have one board member who could not be with us tonight. Mr. Tim Enos, who is our chair, is very regretful that he can't be here. When we scheduled this, he did not anticipate that the Sarasota High School baseball team, which he has been coaching for, he said he's been coaching baseball for 17 years, but really wanted to make sure everyone understood that while he wanted to be here to engage in dialogue, he thought it was appropriate that he be with his team and with his students, which I would 100% agree with that as they continue off into the playoff rounds for baseball. And we wish them luck tonight, and I believe they're playing Windermere. And he sends his regrets, but he also said that he does have open office hours every Wednesday for anyone who wants to engage directly with him or send him an email, and he will be glad to respond. So.
With that, Superintendent, we'll start with questions that were submitted online. We did have a form available online for members of the community to submit questions until 24 hours before this meeting started. So the first question that we received, and Superintendent, we can start this with you. How does Sarasota County Schools plan to stay competitive in the retention of employees with highly specialized skills and or working conditions involving physical hardship when they offer a one-size instructional employee contract?
Oh, that's a great question. I do believe that there is opportunity there. You know, our collaboration with SCTA, our union, collective bargaining unit, is really important one. It's an important collaboration and a partnership to ensure that the working conditions of our employees are the best that they can be. We do know, especially now that the labor force, the workforce, there's a lot of hardships in recruiting and retaining talent in our schools, and those with specialized skills such as therapists, registered nurses. They come with a different certification and pedigree that is very hard to compete with the outside, organizations. So we've got to think differently. If we can't compete with the hospitals that are paying the registered nurses here, we're never going to get them here. And I do believe, and I believe our union partners would agree that there are specialized job roles that we need to attend to see how we can recruit and retain them. So we're having those continuous conversations, and the collective bargaining agreements and negotiations are always ongoing.
Board members, any of you who have any additional thoughts on that, please feel free to weigh in.
No, I think it's a great question. I think that the need to customize based on the demand is so important, and it's something we've talked about certainly in executive session, as a board, publicly. I will say typical union contracts are kind of that one size fits all, and that does not, in my personal opinion, oftentimes afford the real ability to respond to the needs of the district, and it's always going to change. One thing I will say is, in a couple years back, we were able to negotiate with the union on our special needs, our ESE teachers, and change a different lane there, because we knew that was a high priority. To what Superintendent Connor said, is really trying to find ways to be competitive. So we push hard, I know, in our conversations as a board, looking at those areas and how to fill that, and then we leave it to our great negotiating team to really work with our bargaining team so that we can fulfill that need. So I think it's a great question, but I think it's top of mind, absolutely. And I think we're always trying to innovate and get out of that mold of everyone's in this lane, it's all the same, because I don't think we will be able to properly compete and properly respond to the needs of our students.
May I just add, I also would loop into that our paraprofessionals, because I think sometimes we're talking about teachers, which we should be talking about teachers, but paraprofessionals play such an important role in those classrooms, especially our ESE classrooms. And as we diversify our offerings at especially our elementary schools, many of our elementary schools now are housing autism units that they weren't housing before, and it can be difficult to staff those with paraprofessionals and ESE teachers. And so I would just love to loop those folks into this conversation about teachers too.
I would also add that it's a challenge in terms of the pool of money that we receive to figure out how to run the whole kit and caboodle, that we certainly rely on our superintendent to make recommendations, but ultimately the final decisions are ours. And when we as a state are ranked 46th to 47th in terms of the investment of education, and how we have to make sure that not only are we trying to figure out how to highly compensate our employees, because that's the name of the game. It's how I built my businesses, is to pay people well and take care of them and give them great benefits. And speaking of great benefits, those are extraordinarily expensive, and we are trying to figure out how to slice those dollars and put them in. So I think as much as it's always back down to the negotiation that happens between the union and the school board, it really is a bigger picture of how the state is also invested in making sure that teachers are highly compensated.
Another question that we received online was, parents have created groups on social media. In these, they post and write derogatory things about teachers, other students, administrators, transportation employees. Some even use our personal names. They do it anonymously because they can hide behind the screen. It's really hard to have this added burden of stress to our lives when we work so hard for their children. It would be fine if they addressed it with us one-on-one. Is there anything that you as the superintendent or you as the school board can do to add something like this to the code of student conduct?
You want me to start?
Social media is an ugly place oftentimes. I mean, as much as there's great benefits, it's not all cherry and roses by any shape and and I think we all have experienced it. Sadly, I know many of our students have to experience it, and our families and our staff. And so, to me, I'm not one to regulate that. I think it's more, I can speak to, I'll look at some, or some will be brought to my attention. I will bring it to the superintendent, we'll verify it, what have you. A lot that's out there is people blowing off steam in the most inappropriate, offensive, and very childish way. But I believe that there are just opportunities for us as board members to look at, is there a real problem there? Can we respond to it? And tee it over to the superintendent and have the appropriate member of staff respond. My comment to, or recommendation to any member of staff, because I can understand that. I mean, people work tirelessly, and it feels like an insult or a slap in the face where you have no way. It's very similar where it's one-way communication. You can't respond, you can't rebut. And I would recommend don't respond, don't give that, don't feed the troll, as I always say. You just let it go. But you know, I believe that comes down to us as the culture of the district to continue to support staff regardless of what's happening online, because again, we would spend so much time trying to navigate that, whereas we could put our energy and time and focus on maintaining a higher and positive environment. But I feel the pain, and I wish it weren't the case, but sometimes we just have to, I think we all deal with it at every level, and have to have a more positive outlook and just ignore that and not feed it to allow it to become more pervasive.
I think if it's on Facebook, which a lot of things are put on Facebook, there's really not anything we as a board can do, because that's not under the purview of the board. But if it's something that's done on the school board website or to us board members individually, then I honestly, because I have tremendous respect for our teachers and all staff, I don't answer it. I'll send it to the superintendent, and he will usually, in a very appropriate way, like, nix it. But I think that's also, like Mrs. Ziegler said, doing the culture and making sure that we don't react. Because like I said, if it's on Facebook, we've all been subject to that, and you just have to ignore it. But that's not in our purview.
A few months back, I had asked about cell phone usage in the schools overall, probably anticipating the answer that we got, which was that parents really were apprehensive about the removal of cell phones during the course of the day. However, the real method of what I was gunning for, I'm happy to say that my fellow board members agreed with me that the teaching of how cell phones are to be used, starting, in my mind, in kindergarten, all the way forward, the same way that we teach about drugs, the same way that we teach about smoking, the same way, and that we now have to understand that bullying through social media is equivalent to face-to-face bullying, and we have to address that in a manner through curriculum and through additional types of learning. And that's the way I think we can begin to make the changes, because in terms of the general conduct of how I see people comport themselves, adults comport themselves in public and to one another, it's almost understandable that children are behaving this way because the adults are their role models. So the only way that I can see as a school board member that we can address that is to catch it while they're young and to teach not only the perils, but the appropriateness of how social media can be used as a tool.
You know, it's it's always interesting. You can say 99 positive things about someone, and then you say one bad thing or one derogatory thing, and that's the thing that is always remembered. And that's so disheartening with social media too, because not only is it said once, it's there and it stays there for a while. And it can be very, very disheartening to anybody, any one of us who have been a victim of that, because it could be completely not true, but said in a way as if it is true, and most readers are just going to believe what they read. And so while there is no legal stance that we could take as a school district for an adult's post, unless it was something slanderous, libel, there's avenues for that. But unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do on the legal side. But I do agree with the education that we can do, the culture that we can create. One of the things we really do is we do a lot of positive reinforcement. We celebrate all of the great things that our staffs are doing, because we know for every one of those, there's probably one or two of those negative things that are out there, because there's just ugliness that exists. And unfortunately, social media is an easy platform for people to do that. I would suggest, and I know, I would say stay off social media because it is a terrible place. It does have a lot of good, but it has a lot of bad too.
Next question we got, why is there a rule in elementary schools to throw away all unopened food? If any taxpayer stood in the cafeteria as classes dump their trays, they would be appalled at the amount of wasted food that's thrown out on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with the perception that you would see if you were to walk in and see that. There are some reasons why we don't necessarily collect that food. There's some contamination things that could, cross-contamination. Unfortunately, kids, let's just say there were some apples that we wanted to collect, sometimes kids choose to stick forks and things in there. So there's some liability in that for us, and we've talked a lot with our food nutrition services about that, because we don't want waste. And what we're trying to really promote is get what you want when you go through the line. You don't have to get everything if you're not going to eat it. So there's a lot of education now taking place with our students about only take what you need so that we can reduce that. But I don't want to put us in a position as a school district where we're moving food over to a food bank, let's say, and then there's contamination or something there that could hurt us.
And as a mom of a kindergarten student, I will tell you that they are pretty gross. So, I'm all for, yeah, I'm like, oh, disgusting. So I'm all for saving food, particularly maybe if it's prepackaged and it's still sealed and we can sanitize it or something. But I don't think anyone wants my kindergartners leftovers, because that, whoop.
Next question, Superintendent. I know you said you didn't want to do multi-part questions, but these kind of roll all into one. What specific things are being done by the superintendent right now to ensure that projected funding cuts do as little harm as possible to our students? How much of the educational scholarship program is it costing to Sarasota County? And is there anything that we as a district can do to try to ensure that these recipients of educational scholarships aren't the unaccredited private schools or unaccountable private schools?
Okay, and I'll try to take each of those questions separately. On the last, I'll start with the last one on so you'll hear a couple of terms. The Family Empowerment Scholarship, also known as vouchers. You'll hear a lot of different terminology depending on who you talk to. The state of Florida recognizes the Family Empowerment Scholarship. And I would say there's a lot of advocacy that needs to be done in terms of how those dollars, if you're going to talk about where they should be directed in terms of private schools, homeschool, if it's accredited or non-accredited, there's not really any statutory requirements around that, like specifically. And so I would think, maybe speaking to legislators about, if a student is going to opt or a family opts for a scholarship, does it need to be accredited? I don't know that that's necessarily the case right now, that they have to choose that. So I think what we can do in terms of that, since we as a board and a superintendent don't have the power to tell a parent how to use that scholarship, we could obviously have a legislative platform and talk to legislators about, hey, maybe we need to have some criteria around how the use of, where they use those scholarships. The first question was
Preparing for the projected funding cuts that we
Right.
could see as a district based on
right. So I
budget.
think right now with the add-on FTE proposal, which was originally it had been a 50% reduction, and that has gone back and forth between the House and the Senate right now as to what that formula will actually be. I've even heard there may be trying to carve out districts that have high success rates and have been spending their money appropriately, not to punish those districts. So let's just take the worst case scenario in this is that 50% was like, that was what they were going to go with originally. For us, I think one way you combat that is you add more programs. You don't cut them, because by adding more programs, you generate more FTE. So you do you kind of do the reverse of what you think would happen there. What you have to be careful about, though, is, how are we training teachers? How are we spending the money to train them? Can we be a little more efficient in how we do that? Can we have IB travel to Sarasota County versus sending people and flying people to the conferences? Thinking creatively around how we can save a dollar here, save a dollar there to lessen the burden of the funding that we potentially could lose. So it's looking at every line item and seeing where you can be fiscally responsible, I think is the best way. But for me, the way that I think at scale we attack it is we look at ways to expand accelerator programs and generate more money and just be really responsible with every dollar we spend.
I first want to start by saying that the school district has done a couple of things already with the literacy program to make it the dollars that we spend into small groups so that more students are being affected with the same dollars. The same thing is in play and in conversation as we've talked recently in our approach to mental health and mental support for our students. So all of those are proactive measures that are trying to find ways of how to achieve more and do more with the same dollars. So it's a mentality that's in place. The other place that I would tell you is that in my tenure as a school board member, I've seen the turnover since Lori White of superintendents to be approximately every 2 years. In that kind of process, you're going to have dollars that creep out, that get spent, that each school has found ways that programs are working for them and they've invested, but it may not be the wisest investment overall for the school district, and/or are we sharing best practices of what's working and how to leverage those programs in a larger, bigger way and buy them more cost effectively? I will tell you that the conversations that I've had with the superintendent in my one-on-ones is that those programs are going on every single day. Every single day those conversations occur, and I think you know that my background is always looking at the bottom line and trying to find ways to be cost efficient. In terms of the voucher program, I will tell you that the only way to combat that is to get back to your legislatures, because I will start by telling you that I'm a fan of school choice. We have wonderful choices and different charter schools here in Sarasota that make sense. I keep using Dreamers Academy or the Sarasota Military Academy. These are wonderful charter schools that are not, they're public charter schools, but they're not core businesses of our, but yet they're wonderful. So choice is an incredible idea, but vouchers to private schools are, to me, a tax break to the wealthy. The vouchers to charter schools for profit are also similar to that kind of situation. And there are districts, by the way, where that works. It doesn't work for Sarasota. We have one of the best public school districts in the entire state. So what the legislature keeps trying to do is come up with a one-size-fits-all, and it doesn't work for us. And so what we have to do is get on the phone and start emailing and doing all the things that are necessary to let our legislators know that they have to speak up on our behalf, and they have to fight for us and not play the party game in Tallahassee, but to fight for their constituents and the public school system that we have cultivated over all the years, even before I got here.
So I look at this in a way, just if I look at the trajectory and I see the demand for school choice and just the clarity. And I think the way our superintendent, I don't know if anyone read his op-ed, I thought it was fantastic. And I think it really underscores what a different kind of leadership we are now under at the school district. And to me, it's not fearful. I mean, you even said it programmatically. Bring it on. We're going to add more. We want to respond to the demands. We don't want to strip away, because that's ultimately, from a competitive standpoint, going to potentially hurt the enrollment. I can tell you from families that I know who do participate in the Family Empowerment Scholarship, maybe earlier on during COVID was a huge time when a lot of people did not want, for a variety of reasons, to enroll in our traditional public schools. But now, for whatever reason, whether it be the programs that are not being offered at those private schools, or that they just see what's happening in Sarasota County schools, are now coming back to the schools. And I think that's a testament to, one, just being incredibly transparent, responding and being core focused on the academics of supporting every family, but really getting narrow into the key components of an academic success. And I think that is, I mean, that's a market response. And I think for the first time in a while that we are able to respond to that, and I think we're seeing that. And I think that that leadership and that response to the public, and the more we as board members can share with our legislators, but also members of the public, candidly about what we're doing here, I think that's only going to benefit us. I do think that there are conversations that do need to be had. I know I'm having them, I know many up here are having them with legislators as it relates to certain things that have gone off the rails when it comes to certain opportunities of school choice, or charter schools, or capital programs, or what have you. And I think those are, you could pendulum swing from left to right, right? And so sometimes that requires a correction. I think we are best poised than we ever have been in the 10 years I've been on the board to really have those conversations, because we have strong leadership that is focused on the core competence, the core academic pieces that families from all spectrums want their public schools to respond to. And so I think it's game on, and I applaud the superintendent and the entire team being willing to roll up their sleeves and do exactly what it takes to earn every student and family in Sarasota County Schools.
I just want to add to that too, in terms of this is kind of turning more into the school choice conversation, is we lose, so 7,000 students in Sarasota County choose charters. Less than that choose the scholarship. And that's going to continue to grow, but right now I think our biggest opportunity is where we lose kids to charter, and that's at the middle school level. We have to rethink our middle school programming, and I think when we do that, we will get kids coming back to us. So that is the conversation that our team is having between now and through the next year about what 26, 27 looks like for middle school in Sarasota County. And so if we can attack that, I think we can bring back a lot of families, because middle school's scary. Mm-hmm. It is. I was a middle school teacher, so I get to say it. So it's a scary time. Kids are bonkers at that age. And the 6th, 7th, 8th grade model may not be the model that we need anymore. It's an outdated, it's not working. We see, people opting for other choices, especially at 6th grade, because of the fear of middle school. So we're looking at every option to recruit students back, and that's where we have the bulk of the opportunity. 7,000 kids in charter. We love charter, you could be here, but we're gonna compete. We're gonna compete. We want the kids just as much as they do.
And if I could add to that, I think sometimes we hear this narrative with our taxpayer-funded voucher program that students are leaving the public schools in droves, but when you look at the actual numbers statistically, actually across the state of Florida even, our enrollment in public school is relatively stable. Do we see some students leaving? Yes, we do, but it's remarkable how many are staying. The fact is that 70% across the state, and even in Sarasota, 70% of the families that are claiming these taxpayer-funded vouchers were already attending a private school or were already homeschooling. And so what the state of Florida is now doing, in essence, is funding two educational systems. We're funding both our traditional public schools, and now we are also funding many, many private school students, and we hadn't previously been doing that anywhere. So it's very expensive. It costs billions and billions of dollars that we hadn't been taking out of our budget previously. And so in order to balance that budget, our Florida legislators are saying, oh, this is very expensive, this is very costly, where can we cut? And unfortunately, they're choosing to cut public school dollars, which I think is misguided. And so we need to make sure that we are giving an accurate narrative. No students are not leaving public schools in droves. We are now funding the education of students that we were not previously funding, and that's the numbers. Those are the facts.
We've got time for one more question that was pre-submitted in this portion before we move into questions from the audience that's here tonight. This week, the legislature passed a bill revising the middle school and high school start times mandate that would have had all middle schools start after 8 o'clock and all high schools start after 8:30 if districts submit a report to the Department of Education with certain information. Mr. Superintendent, the question is, does the district intend to change the start times for middle schools and high schools starting in the 26-27 school year? And if so, will there be a survey done to families, staff, and the community to see what impacts that might have?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly the response there is we really need to get the entirety of the feedback from all of our constituents. I will say, I recently have surveyed our staff. So the entire staff has had an opportunity to give me feedback. Overwhelmingly, the staff does not want to move forward with changing the start times. But I do think we need to do our due diligence in getting all of the feedback that is required by statute. I think the new law requires us to have some community input and all of that. So I want to make sure that we get all the parents as much feedback as possible. If you ask me to look in a crystal ball, I would, and I'm a parent too, right? So I foresee that we probably won't change. I would be surprised if that feedback came back overwhelmingly wanting to change. Having seen what I've already seen through the staff survey, that's my prediction, but absolutely could be wrong on that.
So, go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
I was just going to say, logistically, just running the transportation department the way it is today without any changes is unbelievably complicated. And so I just want to give the folks in transportation a heads up. And I know, or a compliment, I know that buses are late and things happen, but it's an unbelievably complicated logistic process. And I feel for them if it has to change, because that would only complicate it even further.
I've been following that legislation, and quite honestly, I thought it was kind of a harebrained idea to begin with, and I figured the legislature, they would get beat up tremendously by parents and community members across the whole state, because that impacts athletics just tremendously at the high school, and then it all filters down. So I'm optimistic that it's not going to go anywhere, because I think they're going to get such a pushback when it really comes down to the wire, because you can see through some of the communications, they're already like backtracking. And, as a former teacher, I taught high school and middle school, and I just think, I don't know who put that little idea in somebody's head and it took off, because I just don't think it's, I'm choosing to be very optimistic that it's not going to go anywhere, because I think they're going to get such a pushback for it.
It's one of those like calendars, really, where it's really challenging, where there's going to be half of the people who want this and half that don't. And based on, and I'm no expert in this, but from what I'd read is that the reason the debate started is because of the circadian rhythm and the development age, they needing more sleep. However, to Mr. Edwards' point, and we not so long ago had to tweak our start times by 10 minutes at the most, maybe it was 5, and it was a significant disruption. And I think that absolutely we want to hear from everyone, and we have to, when we do that, have to really outline the unforeseen consequences. Maybe it's athletics. It could be, I'm a strong believer in the opportunity for students to work, because I think it's an extraordinary opportunity for them to learn. Also, their families oftentimes rely on that additional income, and that plays a huge disruption in that piece. And oftentimes, I think that gets set by the wayside. When you talk about logistics on transportation, people's working schedules, aftercare, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so, I look forward to it. I remember actually putting something out on Facebook, even though we were just talking about how much we don't like Facebook. It was a very positive response. I mean, but it was both. It was on two sides. I mean, it was very much that you had people on both camps, and so I want to be open-minded, but my gut is, because I think that after-school pieces is so important, and you really do hijack that in a pretty substantial way. Even if we change it by 30, 45 minutes, you're talking about an hour lost pay, an hour different time. It's like daylight savings time. I feel like it's one of those challenges. So I'm glad the legislature gave us some options, but when we look at it, I hope that when we do survey it, we do really have to paint that full picture, because I think that it sounds good, and I'm certain that there are lots of high school and middle school students that would love the extra sleep, but there are some back-end aspects that are pretty substantial, so it'll be a fun conversation.
The previous district I worked in actually had what they were proposing already implemented. And there was no significant change in achievement, and let's be real. If you give me an extra hour before I got to go to school, I'm probably going to stay up an extra hour, right? And that's the reality of most teenagers is, well, I don't have to be up till this time. I'm going to stretch it, right? So I haven't seen any specific, and having lived through it, I don't know that it's necessarily the best option.
So with that, we'll move on to questions from the audience. Any of the questions that we received online that were previously submitted before the meeting, we will make sure that we answer those, and we will post those on the district website. For this portion of the meeting, everybody who's here that wants to ask a question, one at a time, can go up to the podium, ask questions of the panel that's up here. Try to get to the question as quickly as you can so that we can get as many questions answered tonight in person, and keep that dialogue going as best we can. For the response time from the panel, it is going to be limited to up to 5 minutes, with 1 minute per person to respond. So tonight, they're the ones that are going to get buzzed over here with the timer. So we do have a new timer over here. If you can see it, it'll count you down. When you're at 30 seconds, the light will turn yellow, and then we have a very welcoming buzzer for anybody who goes over their time. So whoever would like to go first, please go. You can go ahead up to the podium and ask the first question.
Hi, I'm Lisa Scher with Support Our Schools. I just want to say thank you, Mr. Connor. This was fabulous. This is your op-ed from the 26th and the 27th. It would have been great over the last 4 years if we hadn't had board members who were pulling so hard to strip money out of the public school system. But you said there's nothing that you can do. You can't tell parents, they should go here or they should go there. But you've given people information, which it's information we've been pushing for a long time. But you do have the ability as a board to make sure that all parents of students know things like, no accountability, no transparency in public schools. A lot of them are not accredited. What do you plan to do to make sure that people know these facts?
I believe the best way to inform parents about their educational options is to highlight what we absolutely know, and it's what we offer in Sarasota County and what we intend to offer. So I think the more clarity we provide around the programs, the benefits of those programs for their students, that is the way we attract people here. It's one thing to say what you're not going to get over there, but I think more people are apt to want to know what they're going to get versus what they're not going to get here or there. So for me, I think we're going to continue in our marketing, our communications department is really being strategic about how do we market the programs, the students in the programs. You know, I do a little series called Trading Spaces, and it's all been focused around job shadowing, like adults. Where we're headed with that is let's talk about what students are actually experiencing in the MASS program at Sarasota High, in the ACE program, in IB, in our CTE career pathways, our construction academies, all of those things. Oh, I'm sorry.
You got buzzed.
I got buzzed. See that? This is what happens when you don't have a buzzer. You forget. It needs to be a little more annoying and in your face.
I told you it was very welcoming.
Right. But we've got to market the, you know what, out of our programs.
If there are no other board members that want to respond, we can give you another minute.
Hi, thank you for doing this. This is really good. So, my question is, again, concerning your column, which I really liked, even though I think it was a reply to what I guess you would call my doom and gloom column of 3 days prior. But I really liked when you said that Sarasota County Schools will challenge the policies of disconnected lawmakers with, quote, resolve and strategic actions. I think that's really good. My question was partially addressed when the online question was about how can you actually say this is going to strengthen schools? Where are you going to get the funding and such? And I'm going to take a slightly different angle, in part because of one thing that happened today that is really upsetting. This is an article all over the press. I'll read the title: Education Department stops $1 billion in funding for school mental health. Now, what I'm fearful of, I can understand what you were talking about if the cuts are, you know, like $5 million, 10 million, maybe even 20 million. But I really think it's going to be a lot more. And not just looking at this year, there is going to be a huge, huge state budget deficit, which even the legislators are saying. It's going to be in 2 years, we're talking like $6 billion. So we know things are going to be seriously affected. This is the first U.S. Department of Ed thing. We're going to have others. And if President Trump's executive orders come to fruition, that the key formula grants for special education, for Title I, if they are turned into block grants, and then his second order was that money be largely used for school choice, and I don't think he's talking about internal school choice that we have within the district. I'm just really fearful. So how do you handle that? I understand gloom and doom is not a great message, but I think there has to be some reality too, that we're not in a great situation, which I know you said that. You even said that. Thanks.
Well, Ms. Lerner, I first want to say thank you for your editorial and your advocacy for the school district. And it was not a direct response as a negative towards you, but it was to acknowledge the fact that there are budget crises. I think we are heading into a time period where we're going to have to make some really, really important decisions about funding. Now, when I say this, I want to be very careful because I don't want to stoke any kind of fear in there. But when you look at a district budget, 75% of that budget is in personnel. For me, if we have to start there, because that's really, if you're talking about multi-millions of dollars, at some point it becomes everything outside of the classroom is what I'm evaluating. How do we make the least amount of impact in the classroom? Obviously, we need teachers, we need paraprofessionals, we need people to operate our schools. So starting at central office, we start consolidating there, you know, and it's unfortunate because it cripples the work that's happening. There's amazing work happening at our central office sites to help support the schools. Every day, I tell our people, we're not in the ivory tower to be sitting up here twiddling our thumbs. We are in support and service of the schools. That's why we spend a lot of time with our principals, who really are the conduit to the rest of the school through all the staff. They're leading the schools, they're leading their staffs. So we support our principals very, very strongly. And so when we talk about these significant potential cuts, the only way you get there is by looking at some of the outside of the classroom positions that, unfortunately, I do believe add a tremendous amount of value, but that's the last place we're going to look at, is in the classroom for cuts. We are always talking about ways to consolidate. You know, we have a lot of buildings that are underutilized, especially at middle schools. We talked about how we redesign and reimagine middle school. You know, is there opportunities to make K-8s where maybe we're moving kids out of a low-enrolled elementary school, combining it with a low-enrolled middle school, create a K-8 model. Now we talk about the utilization of those buildings. Do we sell them? Do we reimagine them as district offices so that we can consolidate money there? So it's a multifaceted approach to do that. But, you know, we're going to take it day by day, and we're going to monitor exactly what's coming at us, and we will respond. And I appreciate what Mr. Edwards said, I think it was the last meeting or before. No matter what comes at us, we will figure out a way to respond to it, and it will be not at the detriments of students or the classroom. Everything else goes before that, right?
What is concerning to me too is the whole mental health piece. You can go up there, it's all right, I'm not gonna talk a long time. Is the whole mental health piece, because as a retired school counselor, as anybody that's a teacher still currently knows, the mental health of students is on the rise. It has to be addressed because it impacts the classroom. And if you start looking at those supports and you have to take away, and I'm not even suggesting that counselors are going to be that, but when you have to still fulfill the mandates that the legislature says you have to, but then you're facing budget cuts, that even makes it harder, because you have to have a certified school counselor to provide those services. You just can't have anybody come in and do that. So it's going to be, it will take planning. It will be very strategic, because not only the whole dollar thing, but who is going to provide those services that are mandated? And the mental health piece is mandated. So that's where a lot of my focus will be. How are we going to look at the whole big picture of the child and make sure that we have those needs met? Because our main focus is the academic piece. But we all know, because Mr. Superintendent Connor said today, you know, you've got Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy, and you got to have Maslow's hierarchy first before you can even get to the learning. So unfortunately, a lot of those supports that are there under the Maslow hierarchy sometimes get cut. So it's going to be a good balancing act.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, a fellow mental health person. I would also add that as a community, it's going to be really, really important for all of us to understand when we're talking about funding and when we're talking with our legislators, the way that school budgets used to be done in Florida with categoricals, many of those monies have now been rolled into the base student allocation, which in recent history has now been used to talk about how we're funding our taxpayer-funded vouchers. So when we talk about block grants, when we talk about reimagining school budgets, it's going to be important for us in our advocacy work to really understand what it means when we roll money back into that BSA and what that looks like for our programs. And when we're, as a board, talking to our legislators, it's not just about how we feel or what we want, it's about numbers and cents. and I think, so.
I'm just going to add quickly, we're focused here obviously on Sarasota traditional public schools. But I would tell you that a year ago, I remember saying in a workshop, even though we have all this money and things are going lovely, I promise you a year from now, it's not going to look so rosy. And I gave you that forecast, and I'm not doom and gloom because I've spent a whole lot of time with trying to find ways to be competitive, trades academies, the healthcare work, all the things that people already know I've done. But I'm forecasting beyond education, things are going to get a heck of a lot harder economically in all areas, not just traditional public education. So folks, fasten your seatbelts and get a direct dial to your legislator. That's what you want.
Hi there, my name is Zaire. Given that a lot of the community and what we've been trying to pull from the board is transparency and more accessibility, I appreciate community dialogue like this, which leads me into a couple questions. Do you guys have any plan to better market or better advertise this series of meetings that you will have for the community? And my second question is, do you have a plan to add more meetings like this or dialogue like this for the community other than the 3 that are scheduled for the calendar year 2025?
So right now we do have 3 of these on the calendar. It's really kind of what I would say a testing phase to see how the response is. We absolutely can consider adding more. That'll be, I think, at the response of the community and the board's will and all of that. The marketing piece, this is the first one out of the gate. We kind of came up with this, right at the end of March, and then we settled on the final format in April, and so we shared this at the last workshop on April 15th. Then we had that posted on our Facebooks and on our publicly noticed websites and all of that. The reason it came on the heels of April 15th to now is because of that cadence. We wanted to have a nice kind of a quarterly cadence on this. So the first one, we felt like we wanted to get one in before the end of the school year because that's rapidly approaching. So I can understand why people think this first one is kind of really soon and there wasn't a lot of marketing pieces there. But I do think we leveraged all of our channels to do that, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media platforms, all of our publicly noticed, saying it at the board meetings. So we'll continue to look at ways we can continue to market better. But I think it's just the first one too. So people will start to get the gist of it. And I think when they see the live stream and the playback of this, that will also spark more interest.
I just want to also add that from my perspective, I think everybody knows that I'm still not convinced that one meeting a month and one workshop a month is going to be sufficient, especially as we begin to start dealing with budget changes, so that it will, in my forecast, be the kinds of things that we need to discuss as a board that we won't be able to facilitate in our one-on-ones with the superintendent, and to hear the will of the board or hear the will of each other. So I'm not 100% sure yet that will be sufficient. The second piece of that I would say is that I really do like this format. I like the fact that I have a chance and to answer questions, and we have a chance to hear how each other thinks about certain things. So I'm not saying that it's an either or. I'm just saying that as we progress, we still may have to add additional meetings and workshops along the way.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I know some of you came from North County, so I applaud you. I know you're committed to this. And I know the superintendent had mentioned, it is very difficult during public comment when people say something and you just sit there and you can't say anything back. And I believe this kind of more casual setting allows for a little bit more dialogue, and hopefully as we continue, it allows for more clarity on a variety of issues, because I think when you have limited time, even when we have limited time here, but that you get stuck in boxes, but that's not necessarily the reality. And there's probably, I'm very optimistic about more solutions and more clarity on a lot of the issues that we are facing as we move forward. So, and I want to give a shout out to our marketing team and our tech team for everything. But as the first one, we were saying, that typically how it works is people will see this after the fact and say, oh, I didn't know. So, you know, hopefully all of us will continue to share that the upcoming one, because it really is a good opportunity for us to hear from one another and talk amongst one another on the variety of issues that are coming forward. So thank you to everyone for showing up tonight.
I spent last weekend with a woman in tears. She was absolutely distraught. She had learned that her student, her child, who has rather significant issues that require lots of services through an IEP, and learned that the extended school year had been cut rather dramatically from 24 to 16 days. And she was really, I think, frightened that that was a harbinger of other things to come for parents who rely on those services, not only throughout the year, but in the extended year. But her concern was, why didn't we know this was coming? What? And I think it's the frustration that lots of parents will have as the board needs to make some very difficult choices. And so I guess I would just ask, how can you involve parents as far in advance as possible? And how do you intend to involve them as you make the choices? And I understand completely there's decisions that parents can't be involved in because of the nature of the decision. But if you could give that some thought, I'd really appreciate it. It was really difficult.
Thank you for sharing that feedback. Ms. O'Day, would you like to just talk a little bit? So Ms. O'Day is our Deputy Superintendent and Chief Academic Officer. I told her she didn't have to be here tonight, but I'm glad she is. And has been responsible for developing our summer programming, and can explain a little bit of some of the decisions that went into that. At least if maybe the parent, I know it may not necessarily address the complete need, but understanding, I think, could help as well.
Yeah, so we have, including summer programming for our students with disabilities that have IEPs, we have about 8 other summer programs that we run. And one of the challenges that we've been running into, not just this year, but last year and years before, was our ability to staff the programs. Because our teachers, you know, when we end school, it's either Thursday or Friday this year, they come back the very next week. They have to do mandatory training for the programs that we're running, and they pretty much start that very next week. So by the time they run through that, they do need a part of the summer to engage in professional learning, to take time with their families, and to then come back, which some of our staff only have about 2 weeks to do that if they're working summer programs. In the past, we were doing that all the way through July, and we were losing student attendance. After July 4th week, we're also losing the ability to staff the program, just because it just wasn't working with their schedules and their family and their needs as individuals outside of the workplace. So it was a decision to reduce it this year by 4 days, because we did used to go after the 4th of July, which in Sarasota County we do have that week off. So we don't come back for one more week anymore. We end it before the 4th of July. We did add 2 days to work 5-day work weeks the first 2 weeks in June, which typically the staff works 4. So if you work summer school, you work 2 5-day weeks the first and second week of June, and then 4-day weeks the rest. So it did reduce that program by 4 days. And, you know, again, It's about how do we ensure that we're not just going for quantity but quality. And we do believe, even this year with our staffing, we had 150 additional teachers apply for these positions, more than we did last year, where in the past we were actually at a deficit and really struggling with our staffing. So we're hoping that although it's 4 days shorter, it's actually going to still be very impactful because the staffing is going to be at a different quality. So those are some of the reasons but I can answer any more questions. I think the other thing that you had mentioned was letting parents know sooner, and I agree with you. I think that get so busy in the work and making sure that we have what we need to do the program, but then if it's something different that people aren't used to, it'd be nice to give a heads up. So I totally take that feedback, and I don't disagree with that. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Okay.
Hey y'all. So Zaire actually took my question that I was originally going to ask. And just really quickly for like a suggestion, because you each ran campaigns to get elected, so you have a large base of people. I think one of the things that'd be super helpful is if each of you posted about these town halls, people who supported your campaigns would also turn out. I think it'd be great to get a lot of people's input. I also know that the timing block is only 30 minutes, so if there are a lot of people, then that can't be accommodated. So I know it's a hot mess everywhere, but my question, thinking about it, I think revolves more around transparency and communication, not just about the town halls, about all the things that the district's facing coming down from Tallahassee. I've been able to go to Tallahassee, I think 3 or 4 times now, and been able to meet with representatives, with senators, and has honestly been an amazing experience. I've loved being able to go to Tallahassee and meeting with the representatives and senators, regardless of party affiliation. I learned a lot. Also, their aides are also just the nicest people ever. But one of the things that I feel like would be really helpful from the district is having a more clear communication about how we as community members can be helpful in going to Tallahassee. For example, House Bill, I think is 5101, that cuts to AP, IB, ACE programs with 50% funding. When the school district put out the sheet, that made it extremely easy to be able to go to representatives and senators to discuss the impacts it would have. For my county, there were around like 300 or 400 other people that also were facing impacts on their school districts, and I know some of their school districts followed Sarasota in creating that sheet, so I thought that was super helpful. But I think that was like the only instance I can think of the school district doing that. And so my question is, how, as a board or a school board, will you use your platforms or your resources to be able to better inform community members and how we can be supportive of the school district and ensure that we can also call, email, meet with representatives to help y'all the best that we can? Thank you.
I would just jump in there and say that it is refreshing to see the administration of our school district, and even occasionally hearing from fellow board members the place where they are willing to speak truth to power. For the longest time that I've been here, that was not happening. And I will also share that it's not just about our administration and our school board. I belong to the Florida School Board Association, and the mentality has been for a long, long time that if we say anything bad about the Department of Education or what the legislature or the governor is doing, then we're going to get funding cut. And so people just froze and didn't do anything and just allowed the onslaught to come at them. So as I said, I think that the shift of saying things like, hey, I like school choice, but this isn't a one-size-fits-all, and these pieces don't work for us in Sarasota is refreshing, and I'm happy to see those changes. And we do have Mr. Parento, who is extremely plugged into Tallahassee and the legislative agendas. So I think that having more sheets available about things that would be beneficial for Sarasota is something that I would be advocating for the board as well as the superintendent. So I like that idea. Thanks for bringing that up.
I would agree. So I think over the course of time, there's been a variety of issues that's probably prevented kind of a unified conversation of going up to Tallahassee and asking. Personally, strategically, years ago, I think you don't want to muzzle yourself. You want to speak truly how you feel, and that we all have our own opinions. But as has been mentioned at previous board meetings, there's a lot of areas where we actually do agree, and that's where the substantive things can be really moving forward. I strongly believe that our district's in a unique position where it was not before to have very candid conversations with legislators, both with the superintendent, the makeup of the board, with the relationship that Mr. Parento has created, and all of those really put us in a better position because a lot of times, if you've been up to Tallahassee, you know, there's everyone's pounding on the door, we want more money, and particularly in education, it would fall on deaf ears. That's why I always say, never say fully fund, because they'll just like shut the door, they won't listen to you, but more strategic and being focused on it, there is an opportunity to move forward. I do agree that when it came to the recent legislation for the additional programmatic, thank you, the add-an-FT. So that's hugely helpful, and that's something we all agree on. And in the past, I think that's where it's probably prevented that kind of advocacy. I know Mrs. Barker mentioned this previously, and we talked about next legislative session, really ramping up before, because as you probably know, a lot of those things are baked in well before the before session starts, right? So once they gavel out this particular session, the board really, I think, has a goal of working together, figuring out where do we all agree on these key areas. It gives me goosebumps because I'm excited about it. And then working with the amazing talent that we have. And then I think you bring up a great point. Let's share that with the community so that they can also join forces, because that absolutely does make a difference when voters are out there sharing where they, trust me, that does put things over the line. So I applaud you for that point, and I think that's something we absolutely can look to the future. And it's been a long time since that's been the case in Sarasota, so I'm very optimistic that can be something we are looking at in the future.
And your point is taken about sharing it on our socials too. And I think it was so helpful when Mr. Connor sent that thing, because I was like, well, I know I can't get in trouble with the school district for sharing this because they came up with it. So, so I have a very small following, but I will share away. So very much support that. Thank you.
And Sebastian, I would say too, that legislative platform that we create is the starting point. And that's where everyone can coalesce around that as a starting point. And then obviously we have to react to the legislative decisions like the add-on FTE that we didn't anticipate. But if you look closely at that platform, we talk about the Family Empowerment Scholarship, we talk about some of the things that are really causing a lot of issues for us. That's built into the platform. The very last one there was talking about how unregulated, and the state saw a huge issue in the third calculation where they had double funded students who had opted for a scholarship, but we educated them, and now they're paid out twice. And if you look at our platform, it says we need a separate district for that fund. Right. Treat them as a school district. And so, we were forward thinking in that aspect, and then we react as needed. And I think we can we'll continue to look at ways to share that out and communicate so that all of us are on the same page and we're lockstep.
My quick question it has something to do with which just came up, was the governor's efforts to enrich children by working all hours of the day and night. Do you as school board have anything to add to that phenomena?
As a father of a 16-year-old who has a job right now and is an 11th grader at Riverview High School, I am not a proponent of her working all hours of the night. I do understand there may be situations where families may rely on that, but I think it's at the detriment of a student's academic success. That's not a good thing, because you're sacrificing short-term for something that could really pull someone maybe out of poverty with an education down the road. It's just my personal opinion. I don't speak for the board. I just speak for me, not even as a I just speak as a father. I'm not a proponent of kids at a certain age working all hours of the night. I think there needs to be a time limit set, and they need to focus on their priority of getting their education.
Hello, I'm Robin Pickett, and I appreciate you doing these meetings. I think it's great. I'm all for as much communication as possible. I'm just looking ahead. I always kind of one of those people look at the danger ahead. Based on the turnout today, and I understand it's the first meeting, and that can explain some of it, but you have a board meeting here once again on May 20th, first meeting in the area. What will be the plan other than just Facebook posts to get the word out? Because I know, being new to this process of trying to be an advocate for public education, I just found out about the meeting 2 days ago, and I pride myself on really kind of knowing what's going on. So the fact that I wasn't able to find it and I'm still learning, I think you're just going to need to do a lot more if you want the board meeting on May 20th to be productive. So could you share any thoughts you have on how you're going to do that?
I think when we went through the first wave of conversation about making changes, I was an advocate of 2 meetings a month and one always being in South County. So I think it becomes habitual if we do a better job at every school board meeting. I like Sebastian's idea about sharing it on our social media. I think all of you can do the same thing. That's an example of how social media is supposed to be used. That I can't answer you any other way than we all have to do a better job of word of mouth and social media and posting it on our own personal pages. And so I appreciate it. I also know that the superintendent will pull the plug if we don't have turnout, because he and I have had those conversations. And so we do need to get people to be here and to attend those school board meetings.
Just one, I'm a believer in the new way combined with the old way, the old-fashioned way. Think about things, bookstores. Those are people involved in education. Put together a little flyer, drop them off at the bookstores, drop them off at toy stores. Have different retailers create a poster, put it in the window. I mean, that is a great way to get the word out. I know it's an old-fashioned way, but it works still. Okay, thank you.
If you want to ask another question, come on up.
Sebastian's sitting there thinking about it.
Hello again. Oh my gosh, I just blanked on my question. Oh wow, it's tragic. I know. I was gonna say. I'm like, this is really exciting. I'd also like the record reflect. Some of y'all went over a minute. No warnings. No buzzers. Just saying. But I do appreciate this format, because I feel like it also shows y'all in like a very different light in comparison to the dais. I feel like sometimes it's intimidating for community members to go to school board meetings. It's a big government building, and sometimes it often feels inaccessible. I also know there was a lot of people who I know in South County that weren't able to make it today. I think they were at a graduation for SCF, I want to say the school was. And so, yeah, I think that goes. I wanted to add on with the. Oh wait, no, I didn't. She covered everything. Never mind. I'm trying to figure out what my question was. Oh my gosh.
How about we let Ms. Shore
Yes.
go, and then you can come back
Yes,
up.
perfect.
You're going to think of it as soon as you sit down. It's just like
If you want to jump back in, knock me out of the way. We took a magic bus down here today, and I was with a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, but none of us could figure out something that was written in your op-ed piece, and hoping maybe that you can give us a better idea. You wrote, our 2025 school choice campaign delivered results. We received 813 first day apps, a 26 increase over our goal of 600, and we reached 1,800 unique applicants, surpassing our target by 44%. Compared to the 2024 campaign, our total application volume rose by 69%, and in total we received 2,700 applications. Now when you say school choice to me, I immediately think public, private, charter, blah, 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 blah. But that's not what you're referring to here, is it? This is the internal school choice. I live in Sarasota High and I want to go to Riverview. Is that
Absolutely.
what this is?
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, we probably should do a better job of explaining that, because school choice has a lot of different definitions these days. So that specific campaign that you're talking about is how we are marketing our programs and having families either within the district that want to choose programs. So I may be a student, for instance, I have an 8th grader. He's at Sarasota Middle. He could have applied to that Riverview IB program or the Sarasota Mass program or an ACE program somewhere. So that's what we're talking about in that aspect. But what was really fascinating and exciting in this round is 371 students that were either charter, private, or homeschool applied to us. And one of the things we've done innovatively that I've talked to a lot of staff who've been here for many years who said we have never went outside of the box of we open up a few seats here or here or here, even though we may have more space. But we say we're only going to open up 5 seats here, 5 seats at this school. We are exploring the option of everyone getting their selection, because we're in a competitive market and parents and students are choosing programs. We have the space. Even if we're even reevaluating our thresholds. We use a 90% threshold at a school. So for instance, Heron Creek, for instance, if your enrollment here was 85%, we set a threshold of 90, which means you have 5% of your seats that are open for potential new students. And then if people apply, they would fill that up. We've even reached those thresholds and went above 90 because we still have space in the school, even though we set that initial 90% threshold. So now every one of those applicants will get their choice, and that right now is equating to 115 new students to our county. So that they could be charter, they could be private, which equates to over $1.2 million. So we talk about attacking this funding issue. This is how we're going to do it. We can't just do the same old, and say we've never done that before. So we're excited about that piece of it, and that, yes, that is what we mean by school choice in this particular campaign. It is what we offer here in Sarasota County Schools and Programming, and you applying for that. So it's exciting.
I think that's a really good question, because school choice gets blobbed into it's so many different things. But again, I love the way in which the approach is we're going to earn every family and student, because our programs are absolutely deserving of it. And there's so many different options, because we all know every child learns differently. There's certain desires that families want or what have you. And this is really the first time I've seen it, so I will support that statement, that we really haven't seen a real marketing strategy, and we have to. And I think it's a great way to do it. I mean, yes, because I think there was almost a mindset as like there was guaranteed students, right? And that is not the way it is, and it hasn't been that way for a really long time. And we've missed out, I think, over some time. But I do think that we're ripe and perfectly set for it now, because I do think, as one board member, I think there has been tremendous improvements and system improvements and focus and strategies, and really having the opportunity to showcase where we are as a district, I think is what's going to continue to bring more. So I believe that next year we're going to continue to see those numbers. And yes, I think that doesn't make that everything's going to be rosy. I mean, there's going to be challenges, but I think that is truly just the economics of things. But I hope we do continue. I think we have an amazing communications team, and I think we have an innovative leadership that's willing to go out and fight for those families and with the information of what we're offering. So I'm very optimistic.
Also, I just want to add that from when we first got those numbers, I I really wanted to know how many new students came, and that was the number that I was most interested in. And I also appreciate the fact that we're re-examining our capacity numbers and allowing for some more wiggle room in those processes, because I also believe that we're not because we have to be competitive, we have to be in the customer service business. We have to really go out of our way to make sure that our parents feel good, our students are happy, all those kinds of things. And when it appears bureaucratic, like, I'm sorry, you're just on a waiting list and we'll call you if that comes up, is not, in my mind, a really high-level, high-touch customer service. So those are the changes that I know Mr. Connor and his team are looking to make. We've talked about it. We've had, I think the Struder Group in doing customer service training. I think they've started in the operations teams and those folks, but then we'll be moving into to administrators and the teaching staff, so that we really all are understanding that we want a high-touch, high-quality public school, traditional public schools.
Can I say one? I just want to follow up on one more piece. Is because we weren't marketing before, a lot of parents didn't know what we had, and then maybe had gone to a private school or opted for homeschooling or whatever alternative there was. And then so the continuity of students being in our classroom from day one is very, very important for them to be successful. And I think we're allowing families that insight far earlier than we ever did, if at all, which I think will also pay dividends, because I think sometimes families will go to a charter school, for example, and be like, this doesn't work for me, but they don't necessarily know where else to go. If we can get them in from the beginning, that's going to help our staff, that's going to help their academic achievement better. And again, this is just not the way we used to do it, but the innovation, I think, will really, again, I think it's going to work because we have a lot to offer.
And I don't want to be redundant, but there are a few of us in this room who know what it was like in the past, and I'll kind of point to you, Deb, who you did charter schools, and it was, this is the way it was going to be, and, then you'd have parents trying to go to board members, and board members would try to finagle, and we're not supposed to do that. So, but for me, working in the district for 35 years, and really, some fabulous, in my opinion, superintendents. But it's a whole different ballgame, because in the past it was kind of like, we're just not going to address that. We'll put the blinders on, and you could see it coming. So with Superintendent Connor, it really is like a whole rejuvenation of our district, and really working to get the parents to see because I think this is a fabulous district. Last night I went to the mass presentations, and those kids are just so bright. And I talked to a lot of parents and grandparents after, and I said, can you just believe the choices that your child has? And they were all so positive and just loved Sarasota High School and all the opportunities. And that's the way I like to market, because when I'm there and I can really speak from the heart of how lucky this district is, because it is easy to get down in the weeds and doom and gloom. But when you have teachers and everybody, principals, just district staff working so hard to make this the choice, and that's what Superintendent Connor has said. I believe in choice, but I want our schools to be the choice. And I think, we're on a good path. And, when I retired, I went back to work as a counselor at one of our charter schools. And that was a real eye-opener. And I'm not going to say anything negative, but I was like, ooh, I am so glad I was a counselor in this district. And some of our charters don't even have school counselors. So it's like, you got a lot of problems there too. It's not all rosy, and part of me was like, I wish I could talk to those parents, but I couldn't then, but I do now, because it's like, look what, we're not perfect, but look what we have to offer your child, and give us a chance.
Yeah.
We do have about 5 minutes left in tonight's meeting, so probably time for one more question.
Okay, perfect. Do rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay, wrote it down this time. So one was more feedback and the other one was a question. The feedback being with currently during school board meetings, you have the student rep, typically gets an award, ceremonial position, sits on the board. But one of the things that I really like to see is that student rep be able to provide more input, obviously, maybe not voting power over how taxpayer dollars are spent, but getting more input from students that are student reps on the board, I feel like would be a great step in getting more, just I guess, representation from how students who sit in our classrooms understand how things, maybe not like every like detail and nuance for every board decision, but they understand what's happening in their schools. They watch what their teachers go through, or maybe they don't get enough resources in certain ways. I know in my time when I was at Booker, we didn't have enough laptops, or we didn't have enough textbooks. We would rotate textbooks around, but that wasn't something that I think my board members were able to know at the time because they weren't in the classroom. And so I think that'd be feedback for hopefully making that position be more of like a functionary role that I think could benefit the board as a whole. Original question was about, again, in my time in Tallahassee, specifically Senate Bill 1708 on the Appropriations Committee for pre-K through 12 education. It was a bill, education bill that essentially, I don't have the definition in front of me, but maybe I should have pulled it up. But I know it applied specifically to Miami-Dade, so it wasn't to every single school district in the state, but it applied to Miami-Dade public schools, and it essentially had, if a public school district wasn't using either classrooms or laboratories, then they would be able to go to the Schools of Hope, the charter schools. And so I was wondering, because during that committee, in meetings we had with senators after that, they had specified and assured that, oh, this is starting in just Miami, and then later it can grow from there. So my question is, what is the school district doing to potentially prepare? Is there anything that we can do in the meantime to help prevent us being in that similar situation? Thank you.
I'm not familiar exactly with the language of that bill. I did hear about it conceptually. I would say the first way to solve that issue is fill our buildings up.
That's right.
Get students in our classrooms, our lower utilization, so that we don't give an opportunity for a School of Hope to come in and take root. There are other things, though. Let's just look at reality. If we were not able to do that in a certain area, how can we repurpose that facility in a way that's still educationally useful to us, but then would keep that from happening? Honestly, I don't ever want to see a School of Hope here. We shouldn't have to. No. We are the hope in Sarasota County. So I've seen those in other districts, and I understand the concept behind them. And I don't think we'll ever be in a position, at least under this leadership, that we would need to have one. So fill our schools up.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good bit. Well, Miami-Dade has its own chapter of statutes, like it's its own animal. But it's not bad to look at it from the horizon. And as I mentioned before, and I think the board, Mr. Kemp sitting to your left, right? Sorry, left, right, wrong. Has had we've had a lot of conversations about the capital side in the restrictions, and again, pendulum's going way too far, and it really has put the districts in a tough spot, and from a financial standpoint too. Now, that's not Schools of Hope. I'm talking about repurposing different facilities and what have you. But I think looking down the pipe and having those conversations, again, I go back to the posture I feel that we are in as relational with the legislature and being able to have those candid conversations where they know we're people who we're not afraid of competition, we're not afraid of choice, we're gonna say bring it on, but we're gonna have really realistic conversations about some of these things don't make sense. They are in fact unfair, they are actually hurting us, and we weren't there before, right? They would have just shut the door because they just thought that there was just no interest in the conversation because they were anti-choice. That's not the case anymore. And so I think a lot of the concern, I think there's a lot of opportunity as I look ahead at the next couple legislative sessions to set some corrections in place. And I think this is the team to do it, so.
I might get in a little trouble for this, but I want to ask Superintendent Connor to address this because I think the community and staff all needs to know this latest legislation of our Sarasota County's capital monies have to now be shared with charter schools' capital monies. So I see that as a way as the community helping us by writing, because that's a whole different area of where, you know, you have these for-profit, and this is me speaking, so you have these for-profit, and let's just say, for whatever reason, they're not around anymore. Mm-hmm. So they've taken out a 15-year mortgage, so we know the bank's gonna get that, but if they own the land, they can sell that. If they own the building, they can sell that. That goes to them. That's your tax dollars, my tax dollars, everybody's tax dollars. I have a real hard time with that one. I mean, I can swallow and make sure we got to work with all the other, but that one, because that is hurting our schools, and we've had to back up our schools that need renovations. And that puts us at a disadvantage because, you know, parents want a building that looks nice. And you go back and look at all of our schools that were knocked down, Philippi Shores, all these schools that were rebuilt, Tuttle, there's so many of them, and we have schools that need a lot of work, and that's capital dollars. So when you take the capital dollars, so could you address that?
No, I would just say I concur on the fact that it's a hard pill to swallow if you're going to give capital funding to charters and then that ends up in the hands of the private industry at some point, right? If they sell the building, where does that money go? It should go back to taxpayers. It should go back into the system. So I think that, to me, there's got to be some regulations if that's the case. I mean, at the end of the day, the students are taxpayers as well that are at the charters. So the fact that they get capital dollars is not the biggest concern. It's what happens when a charter closes or they sell, you know, whatever the case may be. If we sell our building, it just doesn't go to someone's private pockets, right? And that's a problem that needs to be regulated in that sense.
And I think everyone knows my position on that probably, but I did want to say, talk about the student role in our school board meetings. I have often thought, wouldn't it be nice to have, we very often have a super high achieving student, but wouldn't it be cool to have, you know, maybe your everyday Joe Schmo student too? I'd love to see that, and I would love to see a more active student representation in terms of getting that feedback. And I know I've, you know, kind of spitballed with you as one board member what that might look like for me, but if our whole board was interested, that would be the best case scenario. If all of us had, you know, an opportunity for students to gather and come talk to us, I'd love that. So,
if I could just add to that, a long time ago, that was their role. They stayed through board meetings. They would, you know, superintendents would ask them for their opinions. And I know it's a real touchy thing, but as sometimes the board meetings became more, you brought some politics in and things are said to individual board members, and it was like, you don't want a student to be part of that. That's not the example that I want to give to a student. So I think if all we can work together to make these board meetings the business of the board and leave all the other stuff out, do that in the outside of the board. And then that way, I, as a board member, would feel very comfortable having a student there to take part in all of that, because it used to be that way. Students, they stayed the whole meeting unless they had to go. They have homework, they have other things to do. But that was the true purpose of it. And then it's just morphed into the way it is now, so.
Yeah, and just to clarity, they are encouraged to stay if they want, but they tend to they tend to leave. And I will say too, and there's some things that you may not be aware of. We do have a STAR leadership program where they do an outstanding job. We do a student forum every year at STC. We have over 100 students participate at, and they identify the top 10 issues that they're concerned with, and then we bring in the experts in operations or academics, our student support services, to get that feedback, and we collect it all, and then they prioritize their top 3, and then we work with them to iron out solutions for those top 3, and we do that every year. Where I think we could do a better job, to Sebastian's point, is getting a little more involvement with our board in that process, I think would be very productive. All right, I think we are wrapped up. Is I guess we could do some closing remarks. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything we want to add. Kind of like we do at the end of each of our board meetings, right?
I thank you all for being here. I really appreciate this, and I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
I hope that we had an audience on YouTube so that the conversation continues to grow and more people want to show up and have conversations. I'm grateful for all of you also being here and paying such close attention to public education and the work that we do on the dais. So I think all of us are grateful.
No, I agree. Thank you. This is great. And I look forward to the next one. So everyone spread the word. So the next one will have more people. But I also allowed a little bit more dialogue and more back and forth. But no, I think these are great, and I appreciate everyone. I thank you guys for staying after a long day too. So I appreciate everything that you guys do. Thank you to here. Thank you to staff. I know you guys came too. So appreciate all the work, and good job over there.
And thank you. And I like this because I think it shows that we all want what's best for our students. That when you leave all the other stuff out, we really get to what the purpose is, and that's educating our students and trying to provide the most for our staff, because that's what we're here for. So thank you. This was really quite nice.
And I'll just say this, next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And so thank you, teachers. Thank you to all of our teachers who may be watching and all of that. We appreciate what they do each and every day. They're actually the real warriors out there that are doing the hard work. And so happy Teacher Appreciation Week, and thank you all for coming tonight. Today was Principal Appreciation Day, so happy Principal Appreciation Day as well. We have one in the building, so there we go. Great job. Thank you all.